she messaged me about that.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. We're just waiting for Jeff then.
Good. I guess we're pretty
small.
low on attendees today. Yes.
Small but mighty.
That's right.
Stephanie is also done. Yeah.
Thus far we don't have quorum. So if we don't have quorum, we can't actually vote on any major thing. So, but we can still have our meeting. So
I don't think we had any votes slated, so it's probably good timing.
Perfect timing for that
thing. And Stephanie did officially put in her letter of resignation, so we're just waiting for the mayor to authorize a new daily vendor representative. So we shall see. I do not have any more information about the timeline on that, but hopefully it will be done soon. Let's go ahead and get started.
All right, so I'll call it to order. So this is a Public Market Advisory Commission, and today is March 16th, and the time is 5:33 p.m. So Stephanie, can you do the roll call?
All right. Commissioner Wolf.
Here.
Commissioner Farrell.
Oh yeah, I'm here.
Okay. And Commissioners Nemeth and Young are absent as of right now. But Jeff could still pop on. We never know.
Never know. Okay. Right. So item C, approval of agenda. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the agenda. There's Jeff.
All right. Cool.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Hello.
So we're just doing approval of the agenda. Item C, hopefully you had a chance to look over that and see if there are any changes or modifications you have. Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Okay. So then moving on to item D, first public commentary.
Yes. Are there any members of the public that would like to provide public commentary at this time? I see a hand. All right. Go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to talk.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. This is Carlene, and you all have received a copy of a letter that I'm submitting along with other vendors. There aren't a lot of people at market right now, so of those who were there, several signed, and there were a few that we made phone calls and they said put their name on there. If you want to check with them, you're welcome to do that. And I just hope the commission will seriously consider this in light of the fact that there's been so many retirements of producers of vegetables and plants in particular over the last number of years, and there are more coming now. The other thing to think about, just as with the crafters, allowing them to have 2 stalls, there were not a large number of them. I think that's also the case for produce, vegetable, fruit, and plant vendors. I don't think there would be a huge number who would actually want to pay and need 4 stalls. So thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. All right. And that is on the agenda for later on in the meeting to discuss that letter.
Okay, is that all the public that's on there?
That
Yes,
is
looks
all the
like.
public comment I am seeing, yes.
Okay. So then we'll move on to item E, approval of minutes from previous meetings. So you should have received those. So you look over them and see if there are any changes, modifications, suggestions, corrections. I didn't see any myself either. So hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Jeff, is that you?
Yeah.
All right.
Is there a second? Eric, by chance?
Okay, yes. Sorry, I was muted for the motion to approve.
That's fine. Okay, great. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Right. Passes.
Great.
All right. So now moving on to item G, regular business agenda items.
Yep. To update everyone in terms of what we've been working on, March 1st was the deadline for returning vendor applications to get in. Not really any surprises there in terms of who had ours in. There were a few issues due to power losses from the ice storm and following snowstorm. So we did give people a few days of wiggle room because they either physically could not drive it to us or were unable to print out any any additional documents that they needed to include with it. So that was that, but we have moved on. The next step for that is we will be sending out invoices for our annual vendors as well as all returning vendors. At some point this month, we are working with finance department, so it's based on their schedule of when those invoices go out. But that should be by the end of the month. And then the yearly payment deadline will be June 30th, the last day of the current fiscal year. But that was, I believe, all of the report I had from that.
Great. Yeah, so that's for returning it and then new vendor recruitment.
Yes. So related to that, we're also in a time of year where we're getting a ton of applicants. We have already brought on 3 new vendors, one of which has already started. They are a livestock farm, which will also have produce in the summertime. They also do some cottage food in terms of breads, some freeze-dried items, things like that. We also have a new flower farm that will be coming just for Wednesday market this year. They are actually a referral from Stephanie Willette, and they currently do the Howell market, but they're looking for not another weekend market, but a day of the week market. So that will be great because they will help sort of fill a little bit of the void by the DeBoulders and Pat's Bouquets not being available any longer. At market, we have another new producer who is actually a gluten-free bakery. They will be starting hopefully sometime next month. They are currently vendors at the Saline market as well as Canton. And the other 4th one that we've already let on, they are a beverage company and they make shrubs. So what that is a vinegar drink. And they're really exciting. They use all local fruits and other produce and herbs and stuff to make those beverages. And we hope to be welcoming them at some point as well this year. So those are the 4 that we've already let in. We have a stack of about, I want to say 15 applicants still waiting. And that's a mixed bag, anything from other produce farms to dog treats to other, various food items. that we need to still go through. We also have one of our prepared food vendors that wants to become a real vendor. So that's Right Spice Kitchen, who was with us for a lot of the pop-ups last year, as well as some of our food truck rallies. So that's exciting. But that's sort of on our agenda for the next couple of weeks, is getting through this large stack of applicants, orienting people, getting people started. So that should be great. And again, we do have a large number of all sorts of different type of people. Obviously, we're really excited when we see farms applying, less excited when we see 5 bakeries in a row. But we, of course, prioritize people that will both be with us for the whole season, as well as people, if it's prepared food or value-added food, that they are sourcing local ingredients as much as possible. So those are sort of our criteria. In terms of farms, not all farms are created equal in terms of who is applying. Newer people without experience, I have a hard time bringing them on simply because the volume needed to be at our market is hard. And I don't want to kind of set people up for failure before we get started. But I think, even though there are a lot of retirements that have happened and are going to continue happening, we also have a high volume of vendors also wanting to get in the market, including farmers and producers. So I think we're in good shape.
That's good. That's good. Is that actually, how's that going relative? Because I know that during COVID that we had a big downturn in that. And do you know how that compares to previous pre-COVID kind of application rates?
It's hard to say. And it's not that we had a downturn during COVID. Remember that we did a complete moratorium on letting people in for a year because we wanted to make sure there was enough space between everyone. So it's hard to say. I don't know what it is like from years prior. And that's the thing. It's like we always get a high volume of applicants, right? It's very rare that we even have to do recruitment. Although obviously we would love to do more targeted recruitment to farms and things like that. But it seems to be keeping pace. And I think the only real dip was really because of either people that were taking the pandemic off, were using that as an opportunity to retire, or we just didn't let people in for a whole year. So, but I can find some more information to answer that. But that is all I have on that item.
Right. So then moving on to staffing updates.
Yep. So sadly, I mentioned last time that Macy had to move on due to other time responsibilities between grad school and her other job. We have hired a new person. She has not made it through the onboarding process completely yet. We anticipate that should be relatively quick. We hope that she'll be starting, either next week or the week after. This is another person who comes to us with not the same background as Macy, but similar environmental justice background, who has worked in the past for the Washington County Conservation District, is originally from Manchester, but is a current U of M student and is very, very passionate about farmland preservation and keeping local farms vibrant. So Alex and I both thought, she was a perfect fit. And I'll, of course, invite her to participate and introduce herself when she has started, but we're pretty much just waiting for the human resources timeline to be completed with her. But on our end, everything is complete. We are just waiting. So it's great news. The upside as well is that she will be a temporary employee, meaning that triggers that 10-month on, 2-month off cycle. But this has a better timing for us of when that time off will fall, because it will be falling, mid-January through mid-March, which is, obviously we don't need 3 people staffing market in the cold, slow times of year. So that will sort of help that a little bit as well. And I bring that up too, because we did have some other candidates that were quality that worked for other departments in the city, which their timing would not have worked as well with us. So, the silver lining, of course, we miss Macy. She was a great asset, but we believe that the new person will be equally great. And we did, just to give more context, we did interview 6 applicants. out of a pool of 15 people applying. So it was pretty good.
That's great. That's great. I guess your curiosity too. I know that there was discussion before about like Alex's position, or both these positions are 10-month positions, and trying to
Right.
advocate for trying to get something
Right.
transition to a full year. Is there any update on that, or is that still?
It's still the same situation. I know that in terms of parks, there was one staff person for Give 365 that did make the transition from temporary to regular staff. So it's not completely off the table, but it is just a really slow process. So we're still hoping for that eventually. But for right now, Alex is temporary but full-time because of, us adding his hours to the inspection process and other things. So that's still in the long-term goal, but the short-term, we're still waiting.
Sounds good. So then item D, events.
All right, events. So we are hoping to hit the ground running with an even more full events calendar. So little by little, we're getting back to where we had been prior to the pandemic. Our first event, which is maybe even like a soft opening of events, we could say, because there's not much program for it, but is coming up on April 1st. That is our so-called CSA Day. It's just an opportunity for market shoppers during Saturday market to learn about the farms that are offering CSAs, whether that is Getz, for example, Tantre, or all the other ones. And this is both for general market customers as well as for the city CSA program, which is for city employees. And we have partnered again with the Senior Center to try and get the word out about the CSA opportunities for city employees, trying to get different sites involved. So that's something that we're trying to raise the profile of that a little bit. But I'm still waiting for the final flyer from the parks designer, and then we will be marketing that. I would have enjoyed being able to start marketing it a little sooner, but I was out of town and we're still waiting for her. So no problem. But that's the first event really of this year coming up. The second big event will be Flower Day, which is going to be again the Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. And then I might have probably mentioned last time that we're coming back for 4 food truck rallies. We just sent out our first round of acceptances to those folks today. And we are hoping to have a minimum of 15 carts and trucks each time with live music and other additional events and information booths as available. And then, of course, we will be having our cooking demos returning in partnership with Edible Wow. We're still waiting for a specific calendar for them, but we did give them our sort of dream schedule of which produce item or fruit or vegetable could be featured in the menu items that they were preparing that month. But more information forthcoming. The last event, which is sort of a special event tour that the Southfield Parks Department organized with us. They have a group of seniors coming that are affiliated with Southfield Parks in the beginning of May, and they're actually going to be having their own market tour as well as, I believe, cooking demo just for them. But of course, everyone else can view it, and that's going to be during Wednesday market, I believe the second Wednesday market of the year. So that's our sort of short calendar as of right now. I'm sure things will be filled in as they come, but we're moving forward with that for right now. And in terms of events that aren't organized by us, but are happening at our space, Full Moon is coming up April 7th. That will be Friday. They're using the market space for the luminaries. I think it's going to be a little bit of a different format in previous years. I don't think they're doing I don't know if it's a parade per se, or if that's on the other day, but it's going to be mostly just in the Carytown and market locations.
Those sound great. Sounds like a good lineup for things. So.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
And that's all I have for events.
Okay. Then moving on to facility and repairs.
Okay, great. So yesterday, Alex and I did a walkthrough with our boss, Josh, as well as the park operations manager, Scott. to talk about repairs that we're going to need to do this spring at the market. You know, a lot of it's the usual stuff, like someone backed their truck into a downspout or hit a gutter, or there's crumbling concrete all over the place, or there's outlets that don't work because someone broke off a plug in there, you know, just basic stuff that's going to be happening. So we're giving them an inventory of spots to fix there. And then the second part of that conversation was the city has launched this 30-year plan to become not just compliant with ADA, but sort of even more embracing of the ADA sort of philosophy. So a lot of the conversation yesterday was how can we make the market more inclusive and accessible from an ADA standpoint, whether that's things like maybe changing where the token window is oriented so that there's not a curb there, or, you know, maybe putting an automatic door opener on the office door, you know, things like this that would make market a little bit more accessible. Obviously, part of our biggest stumbling blocks with that is all the different levels of concrete all over the market. And again, a lot of the point behind that was to try and make it level for vendors. But when market's not open, it can be, you know, a really big tripping hazard and or just not the most inclusive space for folks. So we're thinking really long term about this in terms of, you know, what are some ways that we can make the market space itself more accessible for everybody, and then what can that look like? Because again, during market hours, we are fine. You know, we have a lot of people blocking the trippable spots with their stalls, but for the rest of the time that we're not there, that's a big issue. So that's also part of the conversation in terms of facilities and repairs. We're also talking again about getting new signs for markets. You know, this was something that had come up in years past, and there had just been a snag with, again, getting bogged down in the design phase. And so we're hoping to get one double-sided brand new big sign for the center of the market, as well as 5 double-sided signs for each entrance. Right now, there's actually only 4 of the small signs, and they're only single-sided. And there's also no signage at the beginning of the the middle aisle. So that's something that we're using. And again, you know, having it double-sided, not sure why they decided to have just a sign on one side, but it is what it is. So that's something that we're excited about, and hopefully that's going to be a pretty quick thing to do this year, and not getting bogged down sort of like conceptual design, and just having something that looks nice with the information we need, and just moving on. So that was part of the conversation yesterday as well during that walkthrough. We also talked a lot about sort of issues in the bathrooms that people have been asking about. You know, small sinks are a point of contention. The ice cold water that results, also things like that. Also finding out too that the brand new bathroom where they put some of the placement of items isn't necessarily at the correct height it needs to be for ADA. So there might be some, you know, small alterations coming to the bathroom areas soon as well. You know, it's real exciting stuff.
It's important though, and that's the thing, is if you need it, then it's really pretty critical. So yeah, totally.
And we're just glad it's on their radar, and you know, had a lot of conversations too about whether we could make a new place to have signage outside the market building instead of just kind of taping it to the front of the market office and calling it good. We're also going to be talking with Give 365 in April, because they got a grant to actually expand signs and expand access to waste facilities at parks facilities. So they're going to be working with us as well as Gallup as part of the big pilot for this program. We're hoping that means it's going to get banners and much larger signs to help people do a better job of sorting their waste between trash, recycling, and compost at the market. And we will be talking with them, as I said, next month. So more information coming from about for that. But that's something else we're looking forward to improve people's experience at market overall.
One comment about the signage too is that I know that I've seen with the the sandwich boards, that those have been really helpful, because I think from what I've experienced with people too is they often are looking down and not up. And the thing is
Right.
too, I've had a lot of people ask me like, this is the farmer's market, but there's no farmer's market here, where it gone all the rest of the time, and they're very confused.
Right.
Versus the sandwich boards appear when it's there.
Yeah.
So that's been a big plus for getting that signage out.
Awesome.
There was also at one point an effort for trying to get the sandwich boards actually out to Main Street, so as to have it appear so that people driving by, particularly like game days and things like that,
Sure.
it's an opportunity for a lot of advertisement for 100,000 people who are driving very slowly.
Right.
And so that might be something else to consider, because it is just like, today, Saturday, remember, put it in your brain.
Yeah.
Ann Arbor Farmers Market is here. So
yeah. And I know the artisan market, they'll actually put a sign on the corner of Detroit Street and Catherine as well, just like across from Detroit Street filling station. So even people on that side, you maybe can't see it, will come over. So our biggest threat to that is the wind, frankly. And I don't want to make it, a bigger tripping hazard, but there's ways that we can circumvent this, or maybe talk to the Main Street Association to see if there's a way that we could combine forces, but that's a great idea. And that is all I have on that item.
any other comments or thoughts from other folks? All right, seeing none, then we'll go into item 2, rule updates.
All right. So letter A, very, very short update. We're still waiting for that final signature. I asked again about it yesterday, so we're hoping that it will be quick. I'm sure that the community services administrator just has a ton on his plate at the current moment, and that's all that we're waiting for. The final language has not changed. All those 3 items that we've worked on for months, if not years, are imminent. They're going to be going into effect very soon. And that's the last thing that we are waiting on for that. So that's A, done.
Great. So item A. Item B, the bylaws committee, which I guess that's me.
Sure is.
It is. So I sent you, Stephanie, a document. Can you show that up here?
Yes.
And
Let
add
me
this to
pull that up.
the record.
Let me just make sure my computer will be showing it.
Exactly.
All right. Let me share my screen. Are folks able to see that?
Yes.
All right.
All right. So last time we identified a number of issues that were potentially things that we could adjust and things that might be worth including for these. And I've kind of dug through more of those and compared with some other bodies. Lisa and I have been talking about this too. So trying to figure out what might work or some ideas with this. But I kind of broke it down to these 4 things. So the first one is term limits. And so yeah, this actually would mostly apply to me, actually, but it would, in general, the intention is to get new blood and keep things rotating through. You don't want to have just eternally incumbents, and there have been bodies which have been plagued by that, and so that's the intention of having term limits for this. PAC has, the Parks Committee has similar language in this, and the idea with this is that no person can serve more than, in their case, I guess 6 years in total. But then they can essentially go fallow for 3 years and come back to life if that's so deemed. So that does kind of split the difference in that way, and that seems reasonable. Maybe a cleaner way to do it would be to kind of do how we do. Sometimes we can have partial appointments where people are appointed midterm. So say something where each person would serve maximum of 2 full terms, and then they would have to take at least 1 term off before being reappointed. Seems a fairly minor change, but I think it would be. I think it's healthy for a body like this to have that rotation. So that's what I'm proposing, and more or less we could just base it off of the PAC language with a slight modification that I'm proposing in there. So at this point, mainly I'm just sharing these with you guys to get feedback and then I'll formally propose them in a way that we can actually go through and make the change. But on that part for term limits, that's what I've got there. The second thing is that for conflicts of interest, that there's currently something asking for a conflict of interest written statement as it's in our bylaws, but we're actually all required to do it when we first sign up. The city requires it. And so we could just take their exact same language. One thing that's unclear in all the bodies I've seen is to what you do with that in terms of who does it go to and who else knows about it. And so what I propose with this is that when we do our January kind of elections and things like that, that's kind of our administrative body function, that we'd also submit a statement of conflicts of interest to the market manager. Then the market manager would, in the next one, report back to us any results where anyone has a conflict of interest, which is it's okay to have a conflict of interest. I mean, it's not okay to have a non-disclosed conflict of interest. And so making sure that it's disclosed not just to the manager but to everyone, so that we can, hey, okay, this is where we know where we're going, and then we can navigate that according to the rules within the agreement, within the bylaws, which is pretty explicit about, if you have a conflict of interest, you have to recuse yourself. So you can't participate in the discussion, and you also can't vote on that. Seems fairly fair and a pretty straightforward way to deal with that. But just to make sure that we are above board with this and clear with that. So that's what I propose for that, is to more as a process change, less of a language change within the bylaws, but maybe a language change in terms of specifying this path so that it's kind of baked into the agreement there. Item 3 is also in the conflict of interest, which says that there's no member can be a petitioner also, which I can see how that kind of makes sense, but given the makeup of our body, that we automatically do have, like, vendors are an inherent part of this body. And it would seem kind of as written that it would be that, like, if you're on this body, you can't have problems, or you can't, and that it's like, wait, if that were taken literally, it would seem to discourage participation. And if it were not taken literally, then why have it? So it seems like what I'm proposing with that is to strike it, because it seems like if we have conflict of interest, a conflict of interest, if you're a petitioner, then disclosed, and then you would then follow procedures for conflict of interest in terms of you would know you wouldn't participate in that discussion, you wouldn't vote in that. So that seems like that would be dealt with in the rest of the body. I'm open to other interpretations of that, but that's kind of my read as to how that could work. And then the fourth thing is a bigger change in some ways, which is currently we have 5 members that are officially designated on this board. We're proposing this, looking at across other bodies of like this, we're actually the smallest, if not the near one of the smallest of these bodies. And there are advantages to numbers in terms of things like today, in terms of quorum. It's a lot easier to achieve quorum when you have more people. The other part of it is just kind of how much input, because sometimes if one person is not present, then oftentimes we're missing a huge fragment of that voice. So it could be an advantage to have more people on this. Also, even for this discussion of trying to work on subcommittees and things like that, we just have fewer minds to work together on things. So there could be an advantage for that. So one solution would be to have one additional vendor, which would be including dailies, annuals, artisans, or food folks. And that might be an interesting way to get more voice within and more agency of some of those less represented groups on this body. That would be a good way to do it. And one additional community member, which is, we could figure out how we want to do that. And again, but just by structure of voting, it should be an odd number. Like having 6 is a problem because you get ties. 7, you don't get ties. So that's kind of where that number happens. So that would be just a modification of Article 4 on membership. So that's what I'm proposing with this. I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts or see any red flags or see any opportunities.
think people are deep in thought about it.
It all seems pretty sensible to me, for what that's worth. I'd given previous feedback on most of this, but yeah, nothing glaringly egregious.
That's good. That's good. And also, if there are any other changes or other things that you see within that document, then we can proceed with that further. But that's more or less my intention with this, is kind of just floating a trial balloon of trying to slowly morph this amorphous thing into something that will eventually become language. And then what I propose with that is that maybe next time I can come back with a proposal of language, we can really hack through that. And if that works, then vote to include that. And again, it will have to go through another round of legal validation because it's part of bylaws, but at least making sure that we're okay with that and proceeding that forward. But that's how I envision that process would move forward.
Yeah, and to move forward with this one, it also needs to go to council because it is our bylaws. So it would have to go to legal first then. But yes, I think to me, it makes a lot of sense to especially bring more vendors on. I always found it a little strange that the current structure that members of the public can actually outvote people that are involved in the market directly. I really like the language of having maybe an at-large vendor representative. So then that way they literally are the encompassing of anyone without having to specify. And I know that's, for example, how the Greenbelt does theirs. They kind of have that floating wild card seat that is more generally at large, but ours could be, vendor at large. And then maybe also to, an at large community member, or we could maybe even do 2 vendors. Not sure, but yeah, I like that part. And I also think you're right. We really do need to have a better process if conflicts come about. How do we address them? How do we make sure that we're listening to everybody and making sure that we're also serving everybody in the same way? And then the beginning part, the term limits. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to go about it, is just sort of, and I think the Greenbelt is also similar in that they do the 2 terms, then the 3 years off, and then you can come back as well. That seems pretty standard throughout the city. So I think I agree that I think that's a good way to go about that too.
Great. That seems good. The thing too with the conflicts of interest section, we've been very lucky within this body, at least for the time I've been here, where that there's not been any major kerfuffle. But I have heard stories of other bodies which have had some serious issues with it. So it seems like, although we haven't personally dealt with it, it's taking it seriously and making sure that we've got processes in place just in case it does arise, that we can handle it gracefully. And I think that's what this is trying to help us with. And I just want to make sure that we maximally support that and make those processes, either the bad things not happen, or if they do happen, make them happen gracefully.
Right. And yeah, I mean, it's 10 years since it was most recently revised. So I think it's perfect timing to take care of this too.
Okay, so then I will come back next time with a revision of language and then a more formal proposal of language, and we'll have hopefully a quorum then too. And so I will try to have that sent out beforehand so that people will have a chance to look it over beforehand too. And then, but it will be more or less following along these lines. So.
Great.
Great.
Well, I'm going to stop sharing then. All right.
So I guess then moving on then for item C, producer only subcommittee. That was that could be a challenge.
Yes, that was Stephanie's thing. She did reach out to me earlier this week, and so she wants to try and schedule that meeting for the subcommittee that Alex and myself will hopefully also be able to attend either next week or the following week. So that is hopefully coming up soon, and that is just sharing the agenda with everyone, making sure people are on the same page, and just a preliminary meeting to reinforce the work going on along the producer only topic. So short and sweet update.
Great. And then item D, the fourth stall for annual cruisers.
All right. So the fourth stall. Do folks need me to share Carlene's letter, or are you able to pull it up yourself? Or I can also, either way.
I've got it. You may as well show it though too, just to,
Okay.
for anyone on TV land might not have it as handy as we do.
Right.
So.
Let me pull that up then. So this was a letter that Carlene had showed us a couple weeks ago, but this is the official final draft. But let me wait for my slightly sluggish computer to pull this document up, and then I will share it. All right. So are you able to see it?
Yep.
Great. As you can see, it's primarily about wanting to have four permanent annual stalls for people that are annual status vendors. It's a little bit confusing because currently, if there is an additional stall available and people would like that, people can get a fourth stall. So there are already things in the rules that provide for this. But this would be, having a fourth assigned stall to you. I don't know if people want to just quickly read it over or if we should just dive into the conversation.
So just to clarify too, that I'm wondering about the history of this too, because I know that there were some people who were grandfathered in for for 3 or 4 vendors. Yep. Do you know that? Can you kind of describe that background a little bit?
Yeah, as far as I know, there was a while in the early 80s where the market was getting stiff opposition from the recent, at the time, expansion of grocery offerings. And they were having a hard time just filling the market at all. So there was an opportunity for people to get a fourth stall. At some point, not sure exact timeline, unfortunately, on this one, that was rescinded so that people then were able to have a maximum of 3 stalls, but people that had already had the 4 stalls, with the exception of one vendor, and I also don't know why that exception was made, everyone else was restricted at 3. The exceptions to that being Grassi's Greenhouse, which is grandfathered in at 4 stalls, as is Sparse Florist and Wasson Fruit Farm. Oakville Farms was the one that is at 3, but I'm not sure that he would even want a 4th stall currently, given the volume of products that he has, more than maybe like 1 or 2 times per year when he has his bedding plants and pumpkins. But everybody else has a max of 3 permanent assigned stalls. With that said, Carlene often uses a 4th stall in the summer. We are able to convert one of the sidewalk stalls close to their stalls down on 4th into a place that's often displayed with flowers, often displayed with pumpkins and decorative gourds, things of that nature. To give context, I know sometimes too, Jim Tadashuk, if the stall next to him is available, especially when it's time for wreaths, he has been able to rent that 4th stall on a daily basis as well. The Donaghy's have done that too when the stall next to them was available. But it becomes a lot more difficult for folks that are locked in next to other people that also have 3 stalls. So logistically, this is very, very difficult to get our head around, mainly because of that. For example, on one side of the main aisle, we have something like 3 to 6. Well, if you take it in segments or by themselves, we have 3 vendors in a row on one side that's 4 stalls, 3 stalls, 3 stalls. And then next to them, it's another 3, 3, 3, 3. And that's the same across the way in the main aisle. So I'm not sure logistically how this would work. So that's one thing. The other is, we're just not sure how many people even want a 4 stall, but there are some people that we know would want them, but directly next to them is either one person stall already pre-assigned or a walkway. So we don't really have wiggle room. So this would have to be a part of a broader conversation of, do we have to reassign stalls to people, which I think could cause, a lot of conflict. I'm not sure exactly how we would address that part of it. That's why this whole time I've just been sort of taking it on a day-by-day basis, saying that, like, hey, if you need that additional stall today and it's open, go for it. The rules already allow this, because that's the other side of this. And like Carleen mentioned, if you're going to get that fourth stall, you have to pay for it annually. So if you only want it, 3 days out of the year, when it's plants time or when it's pumpkin time or whatever, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And that's potentially why there might be that many people that don't want that. But that's the tough nut to crack. And when I went back over the list, there's currently 24 vendors that are produce vendors that have 3 stalls. Again, not sure how many of those would be interested in a 4th stall, but that's quite a few more than artisans, right? Because we were only really talking about 12 artisans, 13 artisans having annual status. The other thing on the table here is that due to retirements, we currently have 5 stalls that are open, meaning that they are unassigned for annual stalls. That does not mean the same thing as them being empty on a market day, because we have plenty of vendors who are daily status that we can fit in these places on any given day. But that's part of what makes this a little bit logistically confusing if you're not that familiar with the inner workings of market on a day-to-day basis. And then the other side of that too is that's 5. We're probably going to get 7 more by July 1st, based on conversations I've had. But so say, all 24 people wanted those, people couldn't get that 4th stall all at once, right? We would then have to do a phased in tier system too, even if we had the space next to each other. So those are some things to think about in the context of this. But I'd be interested to hear from folks. Yeah, go ahead.
I guess that then, so I understand too, the thought is if they were someone with 3 stalls who wanted a 4th stall, a permanent 4th stall, they'd most likely want them all to be contiguous.
Correct.
So that's where the shifting and everything would happen. If they had high seniority, then they could bump other folks, and then that would kind of a chain reaction, what you're saying.
Correct. But the way that it currently works technically is that you could get a 4th stall that's not next to the other stalls. And eventually you would kind of have to wait till it opens up, and then you'd be able to shift into it, which is already how it works for if you're getting your 2nd stall or if you're getting your 3rd stall. I just feel like, if we had a lot of people that wanted to do it at once, it would be incredibly difficult to pull off.
So that's exactly how it would work.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a little kid, it took my dad probably 10 years to get all 3 of our stalls next to each other.
Yeah.
So this would just be like the first initial stepping stone towards working to that. I don't think it would work out where anyone really would get 4 stalls directly in a row right now.
Yeah.
It would just be laying the groundwork.
Sure.
To work towards that. And that's all going to take time. I think something that would be very useful for everybody would be if you could do a survey or have someone do a survey and find out how many people would actually want a 4th stall. And then that would give us, before we even talk about it, I think that would give us something to, look at.
Okay. That's a good idea. Is that something that you would even want, Jeff? Or need?
I'm not even certain. I don't know. I'd probably have to think about it, because the thing is, the way I look at it is if there's only those few times when I'd need it, but I would be guaranteed in my 4th stall that when I did need it, instead of maybe the 4 weeks that I need it for are also the 4 weeks that the market's the busiest.
Right.
So, and it might actually generate, I don't know how to figure it out exactly, but it might actually end up generating more money for the market, because anytime you have an annual vendor who holds a stall and doesn't come in, and then they're able to rent it out on a daily level, it brings, obviously it brings more money in. So that might be something to consider too. I don't think, if I had to guess, I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to want to force stall, but it would be nice for the opportunity for the people who did.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. That's helpful. Does anyone else have any thoughts about this?
From my perspective, I'm a little torn, because in some ways that I like having diversity at the market, and having more vendors would be, that in my ideal world, having everything running really well. But at the same time, I know there are a lot of vendors that have big operations which have a really big diversity of product, and so that's it's kind of the same thing, and they're professionals and they do their thing really well, and that they kind of hit it out of the park. So that's kind of nice to have them too. So we just need a bigger market. We need double the size of the market area, then everything can be done. But that doesn't seem to be in the card. So I'm torn in that way. I can hear both sides.
I guess another thing that I'd like to say is, as things change, like for instance, the way things everything changes, and the direction everything's going, there's less and less farmers. The percentage of people that are farmers is so much less than it's ever been. And if any of my kids want to take over, it takes more and more, and a more bigger, stronger display of things to generate enough money to create a living. And that's the difficult part, is, if your business is growing and it needs to grow a little bit more to be able to continue to do it, then that's something that is a hurdle that's hard to get over sometimes.
Yeah, totally. And I think, the context here is that unfortunately we just don't have the farms that we had in Michigan, even 5 years ago, 10 years ago. So yeah, it's like, that's really important, is making sure that our current vendors have enough space to thrive and be successful, while also like making sure that we have a long-term plan where we're making sure that we're bringing on newer people that are getting established too. It's just a balancing act. But I agree with you. We're really at the precipice now, where the retirements are going to keep coming, and they're going to be some pretty painful ones. I know with Dennis, his retirement being imminent, that's going to leave a giant hole in the flower world locally. So, he's been there, what, 78 years at the market himself, at least. So yeah, it's an important thing to talk about. But I guess I'm just not sure, like, logistically how it worked. But I hear you, if it's just kind of setting the groundwork for a potential future where this is possible. But I can see both sides as well.
And I guess one other concern, kind of the other side of it too, is although it's good to support, kind of make sure that we've got big, robust organizations here, that if
Right.
we unintentionally are creating something that rewards incumbents and then essentially pulls up the ladder, so that a small operator really can't wedge in because there's no space for them, then that would be a loss for the kind of the future, because most farmers don't start out at a giant scale. They start out at a small scale and then they grow. And so that if we somehow had just said, well, you're either big or you're not here, that would be a problem. I don't think we're saying that, but
Right.
that is we're playing with that mix. So
Yeah, and it's expensive to have 4 stalls at the market. So if you're really not able to make up that cash flow, like, it's not really worth even having to pay yearly for it if you're going to be using it like a handful of times. And I think that maybe that's where the choice part comes in again. That's really going to only be then for people that want to make that investment because they think, they really need it. Like, I can see, obviously, Kapnick, a lot of times they need more space, right? There's plenty of times where that's evident, but they're in one of those difficult situations where they're literally between a walkway and another permanent vendor stall. So, that's another question about all of this, is what this could look like. And I don't know. I mean, is the solution having people pay yearly for a forestall, or is it easier for people just to pay, per day if it's available? I'm not sure what the right answer is, but I think it is good that we do have at least some option to begin with. And it's not either permanent forestall or nothing. We are already sort of in between. But yeah, it's an open question, and I think this dialogue will need to continue. When Lisa comes back, when we have a new person too. But I really like that idea of surveying people because, again, I don't know who wants a fourth stall. I mean, I can tell you that Gracias want a fifth stall. But anywho, yeah, is it 4 people or is it 24 people? I don't know. Or if it was 4, it's a lot easier to pull off than if it's every person with the 3 stalls want that, because then they think, oh, I'm never getting. But that's sort of what you were saying, Peter. Like, kind of, would it trigger a race to the bottom where people are thinking, oh, well, I'm only going to be competitive if I have 4 stalls because everybody else has 4 stalls, because that is sort of already how it works with the 3 stalls. And then, of course, then puts bigger impacts on the parking situation, and all that other stuff. So theoretically, it sounds great. Just logistically, I'm not sure what that would look like in our current market setup. Obviously, the market had that before, but there was a lot less vendors, and also the result there was that they had like the secondary row behind the main aisle, and there was like vibrant sidewalk set up where the brinery started out, and things of that nature. So I guess it's more part of the conversation of what do we want the market to look like in the long term, and is this something that's really going to set the groundwork for that in a way we want, or is it something that's going to benefit just a small group of people to the detriment of others? I'm not sure. I think it's definitely needing more conversation.
And just to clarify too, that for the 4th stall or 2nd stall or 3rd stall, is it
Right.
all the same rate per stall, or is there an escalating rate?
There is an escalating rate for paying by the year. There's not an escalating rate if you're paying daily. So actually, it's a better deal. Well, it's hard to say. It depends on how many times you'd be using the form. If you're just using it a handful of times, it makes way more sense to just pay per day. You're going to save a lot of money. But if you know that you're going to be using it at least 15 times, it makes more sense financially to have that. But no, the more real estate you take up at the market, there is a increase in what the stalls cost.
And
Is
this
that
might
is-
be,
Go ahead, Jeff.
this might be a way to, like, if the 3rd stall is X amount of dollars, it could be exponentially more for the 4th. I'm just trying to think, I'm not trying to,
Sure.
But
price gouge yourself.
Yeah, exactly. But there should definitely be some give and take in the whole thing.
Right.
Right. And I personally think it would help the market. I'd like to see how many people actually want a 4th stall before we even talk about it too much.
Yeah.
But I think personally, in the long run, it would help the market because it's gonna, like I said, I can already see, as long as I've been doing this on my own, I can already see what's going on with my costs, and
right.
I almost need to move a little bit more than I'm moving now. And the display area is so limited that it's hard to do that. And I think it would be good for the market as well, because it's gonna let some of the bigger farms continue. I don't think the logistics would really be an issue. Like I said, I think anyone who wants a 4th, I think, would be happy to have a 4th wherever it might be.
Okay.
And all that would kind of work itself out.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. I think we need to just canvass people and see, who's even really interested in this, because it's pretty clear there's at least 4 people that I can think of that are interested. but there may be other people, if that were on the table, right? Maybe people haven't talked about it because they never thought it was even a thing possible. So yeah, I like that idea of asking folks and then seeing where we're at. Because the other part of this too is like, well, in this transition to everyone having a forced stall, are we going to restrict daily vendors getting annual status for that year also? Are we going to like have 12 stalls available just for this fourth stall, or would it have to be something where, it would have to be balanced? So that's another thing that, again, that's a little bit in advance of where we're at in this conversation. But that's something to think about too, in terms of, people that are on that precipice of waiting at their seniority and may have to pause on that to make this happen. But I think, yeah, next step is definitely putting a survey together, or also just talking to people in person, or both, right, about this. And I will start that project on Saturday. I'm sure it's going to come up after this meeting. So, any last thoughts? Did you want to add anything, Eric? Not to put you on the spot.
No, I think I totally agree that the first step is just finding out, gauging interest before any of the rest of this. It seems like it's a pretty complicated or potentially complicated issue. And not if we're solving the problem for one person versus 20 people. It's a whole different tack to approaching it. So.
Yep.
I guess one question that might come up too is with the survey of like, would you be interested in doing this? And two, it's like 1 to 5, whether you're strongly supportive, neutral, strongly opposed, because there might be people who wouldn't do it and they're strongly opposed, and that's useful to know too. I just don't have any. I have no idea.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to say. Yeah, that's a good point.
And even some level of this, I don't know if this doesn't sound silly, but like, are you interested / would you want to implement this ASAP versus is this something you'd like to have in your pocket for 3 years from now?
Right. Yeah. So like the urgency factor for sure. Yep. And on the other side of this too is that, there's a lot of people that use like an extra parking spot for products because they don't have enough space. So I also wonder too if we should put something in the survey that says, like, would you use less parking spaces if you had a forced stall or something like that? Because that might solve that problem potentially too. But we'll add that in. Great. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. You all should have this in your email if you want to take a look later.
Great, that sounds good. All right, so then moving on to item H, new business, non-agenda items. Does anyone have any new business?
Yeah, I realized I forgot to put this into the agenda, and it's very basic, but good news is we are getting our Double Up Food Bucks contract for this year. It is coming anytime now. For those unaware, this is the program that is attached to SNAP, aka food stamps, that allows folks on food assistance to shop at the market. Unfortunately, the funding has been cut for Double Up Food Bucks. So instead of doing a $20 per day free match that matches how much money they take off of their EBT card, it is now $10 per day. We are hoping to collaborate with Fair Food Network to maybe lobby the state, because what had happened was they had anticipated getting about $4 million from the state of Michigan to fund this program. They unfortunately got less than 1 million. So it's quite a deficit. And this is, has nothing to do with the already happening as well reductions to food assistance now that we're far enough away from the pandemic to have those extra things. So that folks aren't aware, Michigan families were getting $95 extra per month on food assistance due to the pandemic. And there was also the pandemic EBT, which was cards that were given to folks whose kids are on free and reduced lunch programs at area public schools because the schools were closed and they couldn't access that. So that's both a positive and a negative. It's been really hard of a transition. Alex and I actually did some outreach about this to a senior living community where the majority of folks speak Mandarin in the north side of Ann Arbor, because that is a large population that uses these benefits. And the language barrier is something that has been a big stumbling block for us. But the good news is with that presentation, we had a translator present, and we seemed to have made a lot of breakthroughs, but unfortunately too, the breakthrough was, hey, by the way, your benefits don't go as far as they used to. So that's the status of that. With that said, we'll also still be doing the Senior Project Fresh and WIC Project Fresh again this year, but a brand new program for us. We've been trying to get into it for years. That's the Prescription for Health program. So if you're not familiar, this is something run by the Washtenaw County Health Department. It's super local to us. How it works is customers go to their doctor and they get a prescription, which is in essence money that they can then spend on Michigan grown fruits and vegetables. So we had been told in the past that we had too high income of a community to use this program, even though we have the highest rate of food assistance of any farmers market in the county. But anywho, so that's a really great thing. We just need to navigate a few federal programs to be able to get that. But that's something that's coming down the pike, which is brand new to us this year. It's been happening at other farmers markets for, I want to say, 8, if not 10 years. But we're finally able to get in for this year. So that's a big deal. But yes, that was the piece on food assistance that I felt that I needed to mention that I did not put in the agenda prior. So sorry.
Great, thank you.
All right.
All right, any other new item of business other folks have? All right, seeing none, then moving on to item J, second public comment, not limited to agenda items.
All right. I see a hand. Go ahead, Carlene.
Hello, this is actually Jake Gates.
Oh, hey, Jake.
Hello. I had a couple of comments on the fourth stall topic, if that's all right.
Oh, that's great. Go ahead.
Mostly I wanted to kind of echo some of the points that Jeff had made, and I think they're good and pretty significant points. The first one being kind of the situation for multi-generational family farms and trying to make that transition where you're supporting multiple households. That can be a challenge, especially when you start, looking at healthcare costs and everything else that's associated with someone that's a full-time farmer. And so, that's applicable to our instance, and I think some others. And a policy like this would help I believe it would help to ensure, hopefully a higher percentage of longevity of multi-generational vendors. And I think there's some distinct advantages to having, and the other thing I was going to mention is it doesn't necessarily have to be multi-generational families. It's even when someone's trying to perpetuate their business and their infrastructure with a non-family member, you're going to need to have a time where there's a transition where it's supporting, the old guard and also the new folks maybe learning and getting experience. So either way, this is something that would help support longer standing vendors. And I think where that really comes as an asset to the market is the value that long-standing members bring. And primarily what I have in mind is the investments in infrastructure at home. So whether it be a produce vendor that's able to, maybe grow a little more challenging crops because they've have the experience or the equipment infrastructure or the different growing practices that they perfected. Or another example might be like orchard growers, where you've got just a tremendous investment in, orchard stock back at home. And that's really a multi-generational investment, especially, someone that's 10, 15 years away from retirement. It's tough to plant trees if you don't have someone coming after you. So those are just two examples that I thought of, why it's a good thing for the market to be sure and support. And all for bringing in new vendors and young blood and different ideas or different products. But I think a blend is important, that you have longevity and the value that brings, as well as younger vendors. And I guess maybe one other thought or observation that I would have on the topic of, concern about whether young vendors are able to enter the market. My experience, and I've been coming to the market regularly since 2000, so that's about 22 years. Daily vendors were waiting something more like 10 years to get annual stalls back when I first started coming. And I don't know what it is now, but I would guess it's something like 2 years. I'm not sure.
It's more like 6 or 7.
Is it really?
Yeah.
But still, I think the trend is the waiting list for younger
Sure,
vendors
less.
is less than it used to be.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just wanted to kind of make a point of is that I think a policy like this would support vendors that are bringing displays and supplies to the market that last the market all day long. I think that we also have a trend at the market as more vendors come in that perhaps are, hobby farmers or part-time farmers, and not that there's not a place for them, but if the market becomes overwhelmingly that type of farmer, the market is empty at noon, because you need vendors that, bring an ample supply and are angling for making a living that will supply the market into the afternoon. And I've also noticed that trend as we've kind of went along here, that Long Isle in particular, late in the day can be pretty bare. So I think that's a bad thing for the market, and maybe a reason to consider supporting the type of vendors that can bring a serious supply to the market. So those are just some of my observations, and I understand there's two sides, but from my perspective, this seems like a good idea, and I agree with Jeff that just give it time, and I think that it will work its way out. Folks will have to wait their turn to get a convenient stall right next to theirs. So that's not going to happen in a month or even in a couple of years, but it will lay the groundwork that folks can work towards that. So those are my thoughts.
Thanks a lot, Jake.
Thank you.
All right. So seeing no other members of the public for comment, we'll move on to item L, adjournment. Thank you all. 6:43.
All right. Great. And we're almost at spring, so we almost made it.
Yay.
Hooray. And
Looks like one more cold market day.
Yeah,
What's that,
exactly.
Jeff?
Looks like one more cold market day, and then it should start warming
Right.
up.
Yeah. This Saturday is always the
Yeah.
coldest day of the week. Awesome. Well, happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. And I'll see you
Happy St.
Saturday.
Patrick's Day.
All right,
Sounds good.
thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Right.